This is Charter Local Edition. My name is Brad Pomerantz. We are joined today by Tonya Schuitmaker. She is the President Pro Tem of the Michigan State Senate. And I just want to thank you for being here today to talk about a very important issue. I am the father of two daughters, 13 and 11. You have a college-age son, a daughter who's about to go to college. And they are on the cusp of really exciting, wonderful times, but also scary times as it relates to interpersonal relations with members of the opposite sex. What can you tell us about the scourge of sexual assaults on college campuses?
Well, it's a very important issue and one that every parent should have that conversation before their kids head off to college.
Right.
The First Lady of the state of Michigan has made this her #1 priority, and she's made it, as you know, it's not political. It goes across all political lines, and so she's made it very bipartisan and bicameral. We have 2 legislative leaders in the Senate and 2 legislative leaders in the House. I myself, with Senator Rebecca Warren, are partnering in the Senate on this Republican-Democrat, and trying to bring awareness to inform, empower, and to find out what the best practices are.
I'm just going to go there. You mentioned 3 women, the First Lady and 2 female state senators. It's wonderful you're doing this. But this conversation needs to include men like me.
It does.
And how do we get men involved? I'm sure there are, but how do we make this an issue that's, crossing not only party lines, not only state house lines, but gender lines?
Well, as you bring up, men have daughters
Right.
too. They have sisters, they have mothers. We had a summit, and so there were a lot of men there as well. And also men can be victims as well.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We both had the good fortune to read a Washington Post extensive article. It was interesting. I think it was 5 to 7% of men said that they were victims of sexual assault. And one person, a woman, mentioned, this fascinated me. She said there was a time where she hooked up with a boy. They were both drunk, and she said, maybe we raped each other because they were both intoxicated and therefore both could not consent.
Well, as you bring up, these young people are for the first time experiencing relationships oftentimes, and they're also experiencing alcohol, which is prevalent on college campuses. We wish it weren't, but the reality of this matter is it is often present in a lot of these situations.
You mentioned alcohol. Every study suggests it's really the #1 driver as it relates to sexual assaults. But what's the answer? Look, the drinking age is 21. Most college students shouldn't be drinking unless they have a later birthday. What do we do in light of this information?
Well, first of all, we can raise awareness, we can inform, we can empower, and as it relates to the adults and the administrators on college campuses, the police, we can find out what the best practices are out there.
You know what else I learned is that another indicator is whether a campus has Greek life. Now, I was a member of a fraternity.
Okay.
Were you a member of a sorority?
I was not.
Okay, were you at a college that had active Greek life? Okay, so you kind of see it from both sides. I mean, my fraternity experience was a very positive one, but I can't lie and say that alcohol wasn't an active part of that camaraderie and that women would come over and partake in alcoholic consumption. So I'm not surprised when the studies indicate such. Some have said, should we ban Greek life?
I don't think that's the answer, but certainly you can. One of the things we can do is with technology, make sure our friends are looking out for our best interests, using kind of the if somebody gets in a situation, gets separated from her friends, making sure that the iPhone technology can track to see where that person is.
It's interesting you mentioned that, Senator, because part of the studies that your staff provided me talked about the importance of bystander intervention.
That's correct.
And this is what you're describing, that the bystanders be there, whether it's girlfriends together looking out for each other, or just someone noticing a girl or a man stumbling down.
That's correct. Certainly we've seen the situations where bystanders kind of turn a blind eye. And that's one of the reasons why it's important to bring awareness to this issue.
I want to ask you about an issue that is percolating in state capitals throughout the country on this question, and it deals with reporting and whether there should be mandatory reporting by colleges of an accusation of sexual assault. I understand in Rhode Island there was a consideration, it died. Virginia and New Jersey are considering it. California requires some form of it. What's your sense of whether there should be mandatory reporting in the state of Michigan?
Well, first of all, reporting is very important, first and foremost. But the other thing and consideration you need to make sure is that you put power in the victim's hands. And some victims, not everyone, but some victims don't want to report it for whatever reason. They feel that it would be re-victimization. And so that's why I think you've seen a lot of the mandatory reporting bills die.
Interesting. The flip side is, and please when I say this, I am not minimizing the situation, but there are some that believe, and I do think there can be some credence given to this, that the issue is so on the front of mind that it's become almost a witch hunt. And people are making accusations that just aren't legitimate and valid. What do we do in that situation?
Well, I think it's important that prosecutors and police investigate, and I think that really weeds out which cases are legitimate and which cases aren't legitimate.
You know as well as I that the federal government is investigating about 100 universities on this very question.
Several here in Michigan.
And it saddens me to say that two of Michigan's finest, University of Michigan and Michigan State, are on that list. I don't know what to make of that. What do you?
Well, I think that's one of the issues that we're going to be kind of digesting from the summit. If anyone out there wants to watch the summit, they can go to the internet.
Oh, great.
It's fascinating.
You got to give me the website. We can put it on the screen.
Fascinating statistics. And so that's one of the things that we're going to be digesting is what are the best practices out there? What are the protocols we as lawmakers can put in to law? I
want to get some advice from you, not just as a senator, but as a mom, because you're a few years ahead of me with your children. You've talked to your son already, I presume. You're about to talk to your daughter. What did you tell them on this issue? What should I tell my daughters in a few years?
Well, just like every child goes off, and you usually have the stay away from drugs and alcohol talk with your children, and certainly younger in life you have the sex talk with them. I think it's also important to make sure that you inform them of their surroundings and make them cognizant that they shouldn't separate themselves from their friends, and if they do, they should immediately get out of that situation.
At the same time, how do we as parents, as leaders, talk to our daughters about this issue in such a way so they are cautious but not afraid of men? I mean, I mentioned to you my 13-year-old daughter. You know, it's a fine line between being cautious and fearful and skeptical and cynical.
Well, just like you have stranger danger talk when they're young, you know, every parent needs to kind of get the facts, you know, and to reassure them that college should and usually is a safe place, but, you know, they should never let down their guard 100%.
What's next for the state of Michigan on this issue? Are you working on legislation? Are you working on a study? What's coming?
Well, we will be looking at it was a lot of information at the summit, a lot of national experts. We are going to be digesting all that and coming up with kind of a plan to address this very important issue.
As a father of two daughters, I want to thank you so much for what you're doing to bring attention to this very important issue. I congratulate you on your son going to Michigan, your daughter on her way to who knows where. And let's just all be careful and be safe. Her name is Tonya Schuitmaker. She is a member of the Michigan State Senate, President Pro Tem. My name is Brad Palmer. We thank you so much for watching us on Charter Local Edition.